to have had our manifesto promises independently verified by an economic think tank. You obviously haven't read the manifesto. You should. We haven't proposed tax cuts for the rich. This is not the right time to do that. Now is the time to take the low-paid or minimum wage out of tax. Now is the time to help the squeezed middle, to give people incentives to go to work, to make that gap between being at work and being on benefits bigger. And I have to say, this talk of austerity from you and all the others, please, 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 can we remember this year we are borrowing £90 billion more. Our national debt is £1.5 trillion. We have a real problem here. And I haven't heard from you, Ed, a single cut that you would make. Not one.
That's wrong, Nigel.
Well, tell me.
Well, I'll tell you.
Tell me how you're going to balance the books.
We said that for pensioners with incomes over £42,000, we'll take away the winter fuel allowance. That's a difficult decision. We've shown how we can save hundreds of millions of pounds in local government, in policing elsewhere. But I just want to take issue. I want to take issue with this point.
Let me bring one or two of the others in.
Let me say this to David about the spending cuts, because I really want the audience to understand this. Because Nigel hasn't denied that he wants to double the spending cuts next year. Now, he's got these fantasy figures that somehow getting out of Europe is going to save all this money, when it's a disaster for jobs in our country. The reality is that for the NHS and education, Nigel, your plans are dangerous. They're like David Cameron's plans, and they are dangerous for our core public services, which Charlotte and many others rely on.
All right, Nicola Sturgeon, do you agree with what Ed Miliband's saying?
I want to get rid of the Tories on May the 7th, and I think it's a disgrace that David Cameron's not here tonight to defend his record. But I want to see... I want to see the Tories replaced with something better. When Ed talks about cuts outside the protected areas, that's jargon. Let me tell you what that means. That means cuts to social care, to social security, to local government services, to defence. Ed's in the position that he's so thrilled to austerity, so scared to be bold, that he's not even doing the right thing by the NHS. He's not promising the money the National Health Service needs. I think it's time not for a pretend alternative to austerity. It's time for a real alternative to austerity. That's what I'm offering. And if Labour won't be bold enough on its own, I think people should vote for parties that will hold Labour to account and make them bolder.
Natalie Bennett, you were nodding in agreement while she was talking.
Exactly right. Let's think about one group of people. There are 800,000 people over the age of 65 in Britain at the moment who need social care, who aren't getting it. Those are people who need help getting out of bed in the morning, people who need help to feed themselves, need help bathing, need help to live a basically decent, civilised life. They're not getting that help. And what the Green Party is saying, we have to provide that help and at the same time ensure that the NHS is providing the services we need. We want to create 400,000 new jobs in social care in the NHS. Those are jobs, I don't know what your plans in life are, Charlotte, but perhaps one of those jobs might be yours. And those are jobs that ensure that the most vulnerable in our society are being looked after, are being cared for. And of course, the people who get those jobs will also be paying tax and national insurance and have some money to spend in their local communities.
Leanne.
Government spending shouldn't just be thought about as expenditure, it should also be thought about as investment in the future. Now, austerity has delivered, we've paid a high price for austerity. 31% of children in Wales are in poverty, 29% in your constituency of children are in poverty, thousands of people on food banks, 30% of people where I live, young people, are out of work. Now, my view is that Labour are letting the Tories off the hook by committing to the Tories' spending plans. So if you were Prime Minister, Ed, I wonder if you could tell us, would you be prepared to hold an emergency budget to reverse those Tory spending cuts that are causing so much pain to so many people in so many of our communities?
Well, you give me a real opportunity, Leanne. Let me tell you what's going to be in Labour's first budget. We're going to have a mansion tax on properties above £2 million to fund our National Health Service, something David Cameron would never do. We're going to abolish the bedroom tax. We're going to have a bank bonus tax to put our young people right across every part of the United Kingdom back to work. And I do say to some of the people on stage tonight, let's not pretend there's no difference between me and David Cameron. You know, Nicola, there's a huge difference between me and David Cameron. Just the three things that we've mentioned, and so many other things besides. And look, the real danger in this country is of a re-elected David Cameron who doubles the spending cuts, falling living standards and a threat to our National Health Service. And that is the big choice on offer at this election.
But Nicola is saying you should be bolder. You may not have heard what she said, but you should be bolder.
I don't say there's no difference between Ed Miliband and David Cameron. I say there's not a big enough difference between Ed Miliband and David Cameron. That's the thing. Now, Charlotte's question was rightly about the next generation. You know, we have experts saying that if we continue with austerity cuts, by 2020 there are going to be 1 million more children across the UK living in poverty. That would be a betrayal of the next generation. What I am proposing is responsible, modest spending increases that still gets the deficit down, because yes, that is important, but doesn't do it by heaping more and more pain onto the backs of the people who can least afford it. And I want to say to Ed, we share a desire to see the back of the Tories, but surely we don't want to replace the Tories with Tory light. We need to replace the Tories with something better.
Ed Miliband, hold on a moment. Let me bring in Nigel Farage, and then I'll come back to you.
I've offered cuts of £32 billion a year that will not affect our public services. Ed has offered peanuts. And as for the rest, Charlotte, back to your question, you're going to be paying for this lot for a very long time to come.
I want to respond directly to Nicola Sturgeon, because, look, Nicola, the other thing you're not telling people tonight is that with your plan for fiscal autonomy, you're planning £7.6 billion worth of cuts in Scotland. The Institute of Fiscal Studies says it. And what's that based on? That's based on your very principled desire for your drive towards independence. You haven't given up that desire towards independence. Now, I don't want to break up the country. I want to run the country in a different way. I think the problem in our country is not that we're one United Kingdom, it's that we're run for the richest and most powerful, and we should be run for working families again. And my plan does it, but it's a responsible plan, Nicola. It's not a plan that denies we need to get the deficit down. It's not a plan that denies to Charlotte that we need to balance the books, or people at home. And people at home know we have to live within our means. And you can come along on the stage tonight and deny the need for difficult decisions, and then plan £7.6 billion worth of cuts in Scotland. But I don't think it's going to convince anyone.
All right, Natalie, and then I'll come to you.
You quote the IFS at me. The IFS said about you that if people vote Labour, they don't know what they're voting for. Now, we know you voted with the Tories for £30 billion of cuts. You say that's not your plan, but there will be cuts. Tell us tonight, because people have a right to know, what is the scale of the cut? How much cut are you talking about, and where is the axe going to fall? It's a simple question. Give us an answer.
I've explained that outside the protected areas, health, education,
how many billions?
And international development spending is going to fall. But I just
by how much?
I ask people at home to be the judge, and that depends on raising living standards, the economic growth we get in our country, as one part of the plan. But I ask people at home to make this judgment. You can have someone on the stage who is denying the need for spending cuts or any difficult decisions, but then is planning these big cuts. Or you can have my plan, or you can have David Cameron's plan, which is to double the cuts next year, bigger cuts in the next 3 years than the last 5, which, as I say, would be deeply damaging to our public services.
All right, I think we should move on in a moment, but Natalie Bennett.
Well, Ed, I just want to say to you, just look at some of your promises and some of the things you have made clear. You want to cap child benefit for 2 years. By contrast, the Green Party wants to lift it to £40 per child per year. You want to, in a classic kind of Labour halfway house, cut university tuition fees by 1/3, which is better than what we've got now, but just a very modest improvement. You also haven't committed to what extra money you're going to put into the NHS that we're being told this morning so desperately needs that extra money. And the other thing that you're really not focusing on is making big multinational companies pay their way. And that's what we desperately need to do at the moment. Rich individuals, that's why the Green Party wants a top rate of tax of 60p for earnings over £150,000. We need to rebalance this society. You're just holding things at the same kind of level.
Can I come back, David?
Okay, no, I think we'll have to move on and we won't get through. But just a last word quickly, Leanne.
Well, I would agree with you that the Tories are damaging. So that's why I would ask you to work with us to bring an end to further Tory cuts and another Tory government.
Okay. I'm sorry, Ed, we've got to keep moving, so we've got 5 questions to come, so let's go on. I'm sure we'll have plenty of chance to have your say as we go along. Our next question comes from Fiona Sword, please.
As a working single parent of 3 children who privately rents my home, I'd like to know each leader's thoughts on the lack of affordable social housing throughout Britain and how their party means to tackle this housing crisis.
Right, and just a reminder, of course, housing, while very high on people's list of worries, is a devolved issue to Scotland and to Wales. So you've had the question, thoughts on the lack of affordable social housing and what you plan to do to tackle it. Ed Miliband.
Well, Fiona, who asked the question, in England, under this government, we're building fewer homes than at any time since the 1920s. And that's got to change. Because I meet so many people around this country who say that they just can't afford to get on the housing ladder, they can't afford to rent, and it is a massive, massive problem. So we've got to have more social housing, we've got to have more private housing to buy, we've got to reform the way the private rental market works in housing as well. And that's what our plan does. A plan to build 200,000 homes a year by 2020, to make housing the top priority for new capital investment, and to do something that hasn't been done in this country for a very long time, to stand up to the large developers who are actually stopping housing being built. So we'll give councils use it or lose it powers to say either developers build on the land or councils can buy that land off them and actually make sure that housing is built. So it's a plan to build homes for people right across England.
Leanne Wood.
Well, Plaid Cymru would oppose the Tories' plans to extend the right to buy because we believe that there should be more social housing and not less, and tackling rising homelessness will not be addressed by allowing more people to become private home owners. There does need to be investment in housing, and the Prime Minister's announcement suggests that there's an additional £5 billion to be spent on housing. We would like councils to build more council housing and for the profits to be reinvested back in that housing for more people. We would also like to see rent caps in order to make housing for rent more affordable for people in all communities. And we'd like to double the council tax on holiday homes.
Okay. Nigel Farage.
Well, like all markets, housing is about demand and supply. One of the big problems we've got is we have to build a new house every 7 minutes in this country just to cope with current levels of migration. So a rapidly rising population has put massive pressure on house building in Britain. Reducing immigration helps, but it doesn't solve the problem. There is a chronic lack of housing. What UKIP proposes is a brownfield building boom. Let's establish a brownfield register. Let's help people with decontamination grants to build on that land. Let's offer incentives such as no stamp duty on properties that are built on brownfield sites. By doing those things, by using empty government buildings, and there are plenty of them, we could produce 200,000 new affordable homes in this country every single year. But it's something we're going to have to start doing very quickly, and we should make sure that all new social housing is for UK nationals only.
Natalie Bennett.
Well, Fiona, I'm going to come back to your situation and your struggle, because it's the struggle of so many people in Britain. The fact is, private landlords last year got £9.3 billion from housing benefit, and 38% of people living in private rental accommodation, that rent is being paid in part or full by that housing benefit. We've got a huge problem that houses have become primarily financial assets and only secondarily places for people to live. That's why the Green Party wants to build 500,000 homes for social rent, genuinely affordable homes over the course of this parliament. Maybe one of them could be yours. We also want to put a cap on private landlords raising the rent. 5-year security of tenure, a cap that your rent goes up by no more than inflation. We really need to turn this around and turn homes into somewhere that's secure, affordable, that you're not 6 months and you'll throw it out and you have to look for a new place and have a whole new huge deposit to pay.
Okay. Thank you very much. Nicola Sturgeon.
Well, Fiona, I think housing is possibly one of the biggest issues in this election campaign. In Scotland, we have a target of 30,000 affordable houses by 2016. We're on track to meet that. We're also considering rent caps to help people in the private rented sector. But I think we need to go much, much further. SNP MPs in the House of Commons would vote for a target of 100,000 affordable homes a year across the UK. But we also need to make sure if we're building new homes for rent, we protect them for people